We now have a period for discussion, for broader discussion. I would open the floor for any of the participants. Start with Stephen Blight from UNICEF.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so yes, I'm with UNICEF, and in my role, I support national governments in about 130 countries to build basic child protection systems. And in 24 countries, we've, with funds provided through the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, we're providing focused support for implementation of the model national response to respond to online sexual exploitation of children. So we've heard in this session from Canada, from Europe, from Italy, from the UK, but from what I'm hearing, and the experts here can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a trend where the victims of abuse are increasingly from low and middle income countries, right? And these are precisely the countries where the socioeconomic vulnerabilities are the highest and the capacities to respond are the lowest. So what comes to mind is how can we at a global level work more effectively to build those national child protection systems at national level in low and middle income countries, to protect victims, respond to cases of abuse. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Let me just say briefly, I'll go to comments to Nada next, but certainly that is a commitment. You're exactly right. And what the panelists here were chosen because of their unique positions and their expertise in this area. But certainly you cite the We Protect Global Alliance and the Model National Response, which is trying to address many countries. Our next global summit is in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia next month in partnership with the African Union. So I think we fully recognize that this is not just a problem in the global north. It is a global phenomenon that we have to be sensitive to that. Nada, let's go to you. I'm sorry. Okay. Let me excuse Her Majesty, who needs to leave us. She has sat through the entire day yesterday and all the day today. Your leadership on behalf of the world's children is now nearly a quarter century old. That 1996 Congress in Stockholm really launched this effort, and the fact that you're still here and you're still battling and you're making a difference for the world's children is remarkable. Thank you for being with us. Nada, let's go to you next.
How do you follow that, right? So first of all, thank you so much. As a Deputy Minister in Canada's federal government, not only are we the regulator of all reporting entities for the proceeds of crime and money laundering, but I'm also the Financial Intelligence Unit for the Government of Canada. That's important for two reasons. We were actually created as an agency in Canada quite differently than anywhere else in the world. It was to protect the privacy of all the financial data that came so that it doesn't automatically go to law enforcement. The reason I raise that is because of yesterday's comments on the technology and where privacy kept coming up. And I think when we talk about policies, even some of the policies that are developed to protect from a public perspective can be used in the private world. So for example, the only time we disclose to law enforcement, and we have over 300 million records from banks, from a lot of other reporting entities, is when a threshold is met. If that was something that was used in private industry, whether it be Google, whether it be the Amazons of the world, where yes, your privacy is protected, but if a threshold of criminality is actually met, you are obligated to actually send that to law enforcement. I think we would be able to find that balance. So because of the conversation to promote appropriate legislation and executive measures, I think that model can be used even in the private sector to advance and protect, as Julie so eloquently said yesterday, protect the child just as much as protecting privacy in terms of privacy rights. The other thing that you mentioned was in terms of other countries, and that it's in low and middle income countries. In Canada, as an example, Project Protect that Stuart so eloquently spoke about, last year alone we had over 300 disclosures. And I'll give you an example, because when you talk about action, it's the people that matter, not the numbers. And in one disclosure alone, 26 Canadians, and they were from all around the world, but this was in Canada, in Toronto. I say women, but it's loosely, children were rescued from human trafficking. The youngest victim being 13 years old, and 60% of them between under 16 years of age. So it really gives you a sense. And the reason I also want to raise this is that's just one. So the action that we can do, and this was just following the money, this was actually being able to do it, and it was all proactive. Now, the one thing in your point about other countries, as a financial intelligence unit, we are part of what is called the Egmont Group, which is over 160 countries. We share information, financial intelligence data across the world. So we actually have an incredible international network that we can actually support this initiative in a very big way, both strategically as well as tactically. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me say to any of the panelists who want to comment after these, just let me know if you want to say something. I want to say. But let me just say about FinTrack, on the issue of cryptocurrencies and the virtual economy, it was FinTrack that led the world in terms of creating policies in response to that. So we're grateful. Stuart.
Yes, I'll just add to that. Increasingly, money is data and data is money. And in the world of virtual currencies, that's exactly what it is. And we're seeing, cash displaced in many countries and moving to online and digital media as the means of payment. And I think that really changes the way we should think about detecting and catching financial crime, be it for child exploitation or any other financial crime. And many of the same rules that apply to the movement of proceeds of crime should also apply to the movement of criminal data packages, which it could include exploitation videos. So again, that threshold point that Nada was making, if there is a means by which we can determine a threshold by which data is also criminal in nature and can be captured and reported, I think that'd be a way to move this forward.
Other comments? Father Bai.
First of all, I really appreciate the efforts. I work closely with the gaming industry, and I didn't realize that they've got their own system of back leading. But for the benefit of people who don't know me, I'm in the victim services side of this, and I've heard a great deal about investment and partnerships in the future. I have 16-year-old children who've performed 3,000 sexual favors already. Okay, so the service end of this is very, very important. And when we look at our major tech companies and look at incredible amounts of dollars, and investing in prevention is necessary, but I'd like to introduce the concept of reparation. That some of this money that we invest, and if you took 1% of your overall earnings, which is a great deal of money, and invest some of that in victim services. We're out there trying, as individuals to raise money to care for victims, and it's great that we try to prevent it in the future, but I think we should also consider reparation. and helping children who've been hurt in the past. And I offer that for your consideration.
Thank you, Father. Other comments? Marie-Claude, of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Thank you. Thank you for being great discussions here today. I just want to talk a little bit about the VGT and some of we talked a lot about law enforcement here in the last 2 days. And the VGT recently at our last meeting identified some challenges that we are faced with. And in particular, I mean, we talked about the volume, having to deal with the volume and, you know, some technical issues. And we love some of the companies here that are helping us, and we need more of that. But I'm glad to see that we have, one of the goals is the legislation, because that's one of the challenges has been identified by the VGT, is we need to not only create appropriate laws. I mean, many countries need those laws, that they don't have the laws yet, but other countries have the appropriate laws, but we need to modernize our laws. I mean, the crime has evolved. We all know, not just on child exploitation, any type of crime. You know, you have crime where you have victims in one country, you have perpetrator in the other country, and you have the servers in another country. So we need to take that into consideration and find global solutions to help us exchange information, evidence, and work with our country. There's great partnerships out there. Like, we have the partnerships, but we need more than that to be able to go after the people and rescue victims in a timely manner.
Great, thank you. Joanna.
Thank you so much for all those different solutions and enlightening talks. But I think what is becoming obvious after the second day of conversation is really that we lack a global governance architecture. And we lack an architect. And everybody has been saying it's great with partnerships, but they have to add value. We shouldn't duplicate our efforts. And this is a very complex ecosystem, so we can only discuss what we specialize in. But at the end of the day, unless all parts of the system function as a system, and we heard this is a global challenge, so we cannot divide it, we're not going to succeed. And I think that's an important conversation to be had. What should that architecture look like?
Any comments from our panelists? Commissioner? No, please.
Just very architecture, I think that we need first building blocks, and that's what we are doing here. So if you have a solid building block, I think that architecture will be more easy. And that's why I so much insisted on avoid duplication and let's build synergies. I would like just to make a very short comment first on privacy and exception for children. Fully agree. That's why I'm really very glad that finally, after 2 years of discussions, our member states at European level 2 weeks ago really agreed to have this exception in our new e-privacy regulation. I insisted a lot on this file because, yeah, let's be very honest, GDPR, it's great. It's about the protection of personal data, but no one knows even now what's happened with our data on Viber and WhatsApp, and we are using this. So electronic communications, we are with old rules for the last 20 years, and it's already insisted. It's a question of level playing field. It's a question of consent of users. We all know how it works, this data economy, but we need to give them our consent if you'd like to use those data. And always on data, and the first question, what we can do more, I think that definitely we need common databases, but here I have a very tricky question. You talk that you have data coming from more than 100 countries. Are we sure that all our data are in the same format? Because very quickly we'll discover something. It's good to work with different countries on different continents, but if our data are not interoperable, It will be just not possible to advance. So please think about this too. It's a very technical aspect that we have here, impressive experts, and I count on you too to give us solutions. But I'd like really to insist how much it's important, this aspect.
Kevin.
Thank you. I agree totally with Father Jeffrey that we need to make sure reparation is at the heart of this, because we are struggling, as I've seen even recently, to support those people who are victims of this crime already. And also what we need to do is, we spend a lot of time, particularly in my world of human trafficking, discussing the issues, looking at where the problem is, trying to get to the definite number. Yet there's other things that we do in life where we say that's the standard, no matter where you are. If you look at other things around driving, around, as I say, flying, around the food that we eat, there are standards that are there. And we spend all our time talking about other things instead of creating the standards. Yeah. And companies, the IT companies and all businesses, we should set the standards. That's the whole idea. What's happened to the role of legislators and leaders? What's happened to them? And we need to say, you know, child abuse online is not allowed, full stop. It's you who are creating it, you end it. Your companies are making a turnover of $1 trillion a year, some of these companies. Bigger than, you know, they'd be about the 30th biggest economy. Together, collectively, they would be a G20 country. And yet then we create taxpayers' money to solve their problems that they've created. We need to be really clear. And we need to go back to who is causing the problem. And that's what this group could do. You can't just come in with a sledgehammer and wreck it. You need to work in partnership, but you need to set out what you want to achieve. And if you don't do that and you end up just negotiating and dancing around, that dance will last for the next 10 or 20 years.
Other comments? Monsignor Sanchez.
I want to know, one question is, I want to know more about this digital identity, that in what sense could be useful to resolve this problem. And the other thing is, I want to ask to Kevin, what could be your suggestion for the people that work in, especially in the digital world, the CEO of the digital world? Because we can conclude that if we control the data and we control the banks, the money that go in the banks, we can do something really and change things. So what is your concrete suggestion? Do you think that we need some rule more clear or some to arrive to this standard that you say? Thank you.
If we look at the issue of corruption, we brought in international corruption laws and we set a standard. Okay, we haven't got rid of corruption, but it's going in the right direction and there is enormous sanction. I've met with a number of CEOs from some of the biggest companies in the world, and all of them say they want to end this. And many of them say, but we need rules and regulations, because when we enter into the boardroom, we have lots of things we need to consider, and the likes to do's will never get to the top of the list. So we need to actually listen to them. And then when they say this, we need to translate that into action. But we need to get the legislators. We need to work with organizations and bodies like the G20, which controls 85% of the world's economy, the EU. And we need to get these rules clearly defined. And we need to say what they are. And we need to get the CEOs in this room, the decision makers, and get them to commit. And then we follow it through, because they're telling us they have troubles getting this done because of their own business culture or their own business challenges or who they're dealing with. And then we present it on their behalf to governments, like at the G20 or like at the EU, and we get that translated into legislation on their behalf. And then we will get things working. But we need to bring that in partnership, and we need to make sure that we're considering the smaller countries that need to be helped. And I hear the comments, and we need to look at things like the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. They can help in those countries, because many of those countries are the ones that need to be assisted with certain legislation. And we need to be honest. Sometimes I hear talk, particularly around human trafficking, which is dancing around. Father Jeff talks about it very straight because he's seeing it day in, day out. And until we talk straight, until we're honest, and if we try and blame the parent who has got all these other issues, when I was a police officer in South London, the parents that I would deal with every day, whose children were being arrested for all sorts of crime, including murder, would I ever turn around and put that blame back on them? If I did, I would be sacked. So companies, you've got to listen and start acting, because you are actually part of the problem at the moment, but we want you to be part of and the main source of the solution.
Yes.
This is very similar to a lot of the conversations I had with technologists that are not part of the big companies that are in this room that we're talking about this over the last 2 days. And what I refer to these individuals are, they're very smart people and they're very libertarian in their ways. And they seek to make the internet like real life and to have privacy like you can have a conversation in your home on the internet. And to be able to share a physical image like you could in the privacy of your own home on the internet. And there's a lot of things that we discussed today, how that is scary, but maybe it's a realization that we have to make, a progressive one, to say, we won't be able to control that aspect of the internet in the future. So what can we control? And a lot of these things have been discussed. Education of youth, how we prosecute anyone who actually posts images online, how we look at the demand side, how we look at the servers. Anything that we could actually have a control over, we should focus on. But we can't lose sight that there are many people out there that seek to make the internet autonomous and like it's never been before. So we come from a place where the internet was controlled and centralized. The internet's moving to a decentralized way where people can have their real life autonomy online. And like that analogy of the knife and other analogies, that has good and bad attributes. But we may not be able to control that aspect of it. And even though Facebook, Google, Apple will help, it may be someone that's not in the room that's going to release a revolutionary technology that's going to make things even harder for us. But that doesn't mean that our efforts are going to go to waste. We just have to have a diversified approach and really focus on social aspects, judicial aspects, and these things are being done in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency space, where we're starting to realize that we can't stop people from transacting between each other, but many things are being done around them to make people really think before they do something illegal in that autonomous environment, that law enforcement will come after them from different angles, not necessarily stopping that autonomy, but really clamping down on any single thing we can actually get a foothold around it. So I really advocate for a diversified approach, because there could be technologists out there listening to us saying, oh, there's a bunch of old people in the room that don't really understand where we're going. And I think, and not to be too cynical, but there's a lot of 19, 20-year-olds out there that are saying, we're going to change the world, we're going to turn things upside down, and I think we need to keep that in mind as we go forward, that this is what we're combating against.
Okay, couple more comments, because it's time for the coffee break. But Susie, let's start with you. Thanks, Joe. It's a really good point.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the wonderful presentations this morning. I deal with child sexual abuse images and videos, so my comments are confined to that. But one of the things, even in the space I deal with, it's so nuanced. There's such a range of content within the child sexual abuse sphere of images, and I'm worried about when we have conversations. So only 20% of what we see is behind payment barriers. When people say it's all on the dark web, I think, really? That's why we've got 20 people working all the time on the open web. So, I think there's a lot of discussion about not getting too drilled into a particular type of content, because it's very nuanced. And one of the things I wanted to say in relation to with the fact that children are often from very poor backgrounds, economic backgrounds, they are, but also children are not often from there. So if I could just put in a word for, yesterday I made a big announcement about the amount of content in the Netherlands, but I'd also say that a third of the content we've seen this year, a third is of self-generated content, and 95% of that is of girls aged 11 to 13. And to give you an example of what we actually mean, these are children who are clearly victims, but they are actively participating in, for likes, for popularity. One video I have seen of a child who's 11 who is doing what is a category A activity, which in the UK is the worst kind, is online in a very smart room, doing things as people ask her to do things for likes, and in the middle of this, you hear her mother knocking on the door saying, "Dinner's ready." So this is a video that's been videoed and then harvested and put onto a child sexual abuse website. And I think, the danger is you've got kids, you've got babies who are under 2 being sexually abused, through to children who are being very individually groomed, through to, this sort of behaviour. So we need to be able to talk about the whole scale of it, not just, focus on one area. And it is really complicated, but, we need to be aware that, yes, we're seeing children from developing countries, although I have to say, in our work, we're not really seeing children from developing countries, because you can pay to have live stream sex for £10, according to the police. So they don't need to video it because it's so cheap. And, so actually, we're still seeing predominantly Western children in the videos and images. So, let's just bear in mind it's a huge range, and we need to just focus on the fact that all children are pretty much vulnerable, whoever they are and wherever they are now, they're all vulnerable. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. I think this is probably a good stopping point. I'd like to thank the panel for your extraordinary presentations and for your being here. We look forward to working with you going forward.